Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. On this episode, we're talking to Amanda, the powerhouse DIYer behind the Motel Renovation in Greybull, Indiana. And you guys, I have to admit that some podcast episodes are really just an excuse for me to spend an hour hanging out with people that I think are cool and interesting, and this is definitely one of them. Amanda doesn't technically own a cabin, but I'm hoping you'll overlook this because of all the other cool things she's doing. With a history running a home in Phoenix on Airbnb, it was 2 years ago that Amanda and her now business partner Kyle bought an old rundown motel in Greybull, Wyoming, and started bringing it back to life. And when I say this, I mean it literally. Amanda has done everything from gut bathrooms to installing tile to laying flooring, designing the rooms, and then getting ready to launch them. She's doing it all herself and documenting it all on social media. Literally, she creates a reel every single day going over everything she did that day, taking you with her along on the journey. I've been following her since the very early days, and getting to talk to her this week was truly a podcast highlight for me. She shares all the details from how she went into business with someone she met on the internet, how they're financing it, how the rental plan changed over time based on what they're learning about the market and her community, and best yet, how she's found a new home in Greybull. Honestly, cabin or no cabin, I think you guys are going to love this one. Let's do it. I'm super excited to be talking to you because I have been following your motel renovation since like very early on. And I can't remember if I found you through Trout Cabin or how I originally found you because I know that you all are in the same town.
Yeah.
But what I love about it is the way that you're documenting the renovation that you're doing there. So I'm going to start by saying for anyone listening who does not follow Amanda on social media, it's at Just Do It Amanda. You should do that first. You should pause this. You should do that first. And you should like catch up a little bit on what's been happening. Because I feel like the way that you're documenting what you do is so different from anyone else documenting this kind of stuff that's what first caught my eye. But then also it's a motel. So I have a lot of questions for all of that.
First of all, I appreciate it so much. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. I feel like it's one of those things where I knew I would have content like continuously. I wasn't sure how to show it to everybody. So the fact that people are enjoying it being delivered in this way makes me happy. You know, it's certainly not a before and after every day and it's not very glamorous, but I think that's part of the excitement.
Yeah. Where did you come up with the idea to document it real time every day along the way?
I don't even know that I officially came up with that idea. I think it just started. I think I knew when I got up there, I wanted to do a real, like, day one, here I am, like, look at the state of everything and look at how horrible this looks. And then I thought, well, I got to show people what I do tomorrow. I mean, I guess that's day two. And I was like, God, am I really going to do a reel every single day? Or could it just be in stories or could it be, you know, whatever. And I started to, because there's so much happening, I started to just press record on my phone and turn everything into a time lapse. And I was like, they're going to get like a minute and a half of like an 8-hour day. And like some days are going to feel like, whoa, so much happened. And other days are going to be like, you just painted white all day. Like it's just how boring. But I mean, that's how some days feel like not a lot goes on. But really every day is progress, you know?
That's right. That's right. Do you edit them? I'm going to ask some real like technical questions. Please. Because I do know people ask about social media all the time.
Right.
And Reels in particular, I have identified as the largest tool for quick growth.
Okay.
But also the highest barrier to entry for someone who's like not comfortable with video. Now I do video full time in my real job. So that felt very accessible to me. But for you, you don't. Did that feel intimidating when you started? How did you like...
Not only was the act of like putting together a reel intimidating. Anyone who knows me before, I have almost like a whole other life before where I was the founder of a dating app before this. And it was like, there's a lot of crazy, it was a dating app for athletes. And in promoting that was my first kind of dose of like, I don't want to be on camera. Like, I don't want to be the front. I don't want to, can I pay somebody to be the face of this thing? Can I, you know, and that was my first dose of like, no, girl, it's you. Like, you better get comfortable because that's it. And so I was a PE teacher for 10 years and one of my former coworkers follows and actually sent me a DM the other day. And he was like, I am so proud with how comfortable you sound like on the microphone and like, because he's like, I used to show up to work every day and be like, oh God, I got to film this thing for the app and I don't want to. And he's like, and so I've done a bunch of podcasts for the app and all this. So that was kind of training almost. And now that I'm at the motel, the one thing I do like is that I don't have to look at the camera and say, hey guys, look what I'm doing. It's more just like watch and I just talk,
Yes.
So recording it later, the voiceover, it was a little overwhelming at first because I didn't know how to chop things up. I didn't know how to do any of it. So now what I do is I just speed everything up. I put it together in what I think looks as entertaining as I can. And then I just play it all and I record as it goes. And I'll like stop and say, oh, that one sounded stupid and redo it. But it is basically like the minute and a half video is filmed pretty early on. And then by like 6 or 7 o'clock, I'm like, all right, get your happy voice on and like, here we go. And tell
Do you script it?
Say it again.
Do you script it? It?
No, not at all.
You do all of them just like you're watching it.
I do all of it while I'm watching the video on my phone. So it's happening and I'm like, all right, then I have to go do some drywall and it's all random.
Okay. I feel like there's several big takeaways here. One of them is make it as easy as possible for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And like that feels so much more doable than having to script it and like edit it in another tool and do all of that.
Yes.
Okay. The second big takeaway that I'm hearing from you, though, that I try to tell people all the time, is that it gets easier. The more often you do it, it gets easier. Oh, my God.
So much easier. And I still don't feel like I'm the person who wants to be at the forefront of any of it. But the fact that it gets easier is huge. And the fact that, like, even if you have a small corner of the internet, and I'm talking about your 10 closest family and friends watching, they're going to comment and say, good job, Amanda. Like, way to go. What a great day or whatever. Like that will encourage you to show up again tomorrow and do it again. And the fact that I have had a little bit of luck in some growth, that I've had some more followers and like actual strangers being like, oh, this is cool. Like that makes you want to show up for them the next day.
Yeah.
Because there's days, trust me, there's days that feel like Groundhog Day around here where I'm like, I love what I'm doing and I would not trade it. But there's days where I'm like, dang, I got to drywall again today. Like that's a lot of drywall. And I think to myself, people think that mundane stuff is interesting. So show them what happened today. Yeah. And, and then in doing that, I think I just get so excited about the fact that people like watching it that like, as you can see right now, I'm in this small little room and I'm yelling. My sister's always like, Amanda, volume, Amanda, volume, volume. I just like start going and I'm like, oh my God, it's a little overwhelming for a lot of people, but it's one of those things that like, you can't fake the funk, like I'm that excited about what's going on.
Nope. Literally every car ride to Maine, I'm like, call someone on my first shift because it's still like daylight.
Right.
And Sean is trying to sleep next to me, my husband, and he will like literally take his eye mask off and be like, can you stop yelling?
Right.
And I'm like, just having a conversation.
Right. Like the person is right there on the phone and I'm like, no, they need to get my excitement and be on board with me.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, I want to back up a little bit because you've dropped a couple things that are actually answers to questions that I have, which is like one of them is, did you always have this entrepreneurial spirit? And I'm hearing the fact that you started a dating app that you do. Can you take us back to that? And you mentioned it's for athletes. You played college basketball, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I played, I'm from California originally, Santa Monica. And I played 4 years of basketball at the University of Rhode Island and then a fifth year at UMass Lowell up north of Boston. So I was out in New England for a while and absolutely loved it out there. And then came home, started pretty quickly teaching PE and coaching basketball. And it was lovely. It was so awesome. But as somebody who kind of needs to stay busy and is always doing something, those summers off were like really an opportunity for me to be like, so what does Amanda really like to do? Like, what do I really enjoy? And I mean, ever since I was a kid, I was into like refinishing furniture and whatever. So during my time as a PE teacher, I actually had a wood sign making business on Etsy where I would like hand paint like wedding decor and seating arrangement charts, and like I would hand paint in that time where all those rustic weddings were happening.
I remember.
Oh man, it was great. I was doing baby shower stuff, and it was really cool. And that was all on the side while I was teaching. And then I quit coaching at the high school level, and I had a lot more free time. And I was like, or like early 30s. Right now, I just turned 37, and I was like early 30s, and I was like, man, like dating in LA is so hard. It's so difficult. And I got to this point where I was like, well, there's a dating app for everybody. I hated dating apps, like I hated them. I just felt like it was this needle in a haystack type deal, and I don't feel like I present very well in like a paragraph. It just is kind of strange. And I just thought, well, there's a dating app for Jewish people and Black people and gay people and chefs and people who love bacon and whatever. And I was like, who do I identify as like are my people? And for a long time that had always been athletes. And so I thought, I wonder if that exists. And then cut to like a year later and I made it, and it has been awesome. It actually is still out in the world. It's called Playoff. And
I like that name.
Yeah. I was like, how can I, it's been so rewarding, but I also was ready to move on even from that. Like I was like, there's more out there for me, and I cannot wait to see what it is. And here we are.
Okay, I have some questions about how we wrap up this nice chapter and move on to the next one. Okay, first of all, did you find your partner on Playoff?
No, I actually found my partner out here.
Okay, in Greybull?
Yeah.
Okay, I love that. We're going to come to that next. Second, how did you sell the business? Did someone acquire it? Did you have an exit? What happened?
No, sadly, as much of an entrepreneurial mind as I have, I was like ready for the next project and did not have the money or time or energy, or more specifically expertise and knowledge as to how to sell it. And it kind of truthfully is still heartbreaking. So if anybody out there wants to help me or wants to buy it, please let me know, because I just feel like it's there. At one point we had over 90,000 users, and it was like not millions yet, but it was going, you know what I mean? There was a lot of people on there, and hearing matchmaking stories was super cool for me. And it was a really rewarding process. Truthfully, more rewarding than me finding my person like that. Knowing other people were out there finding happy, like it was super cool. It was just something I never expected to be that satisfied with and feel that gratifying. And I just didn't know what to do next. I couldn't really pay. There's a few different apps where like small businesses can sell themselves, and it was like some of it was just like too much for me to go down that road. And so it is still in the App Store, but it needs to get into the hands of somebody who can really take it to the next level. And I just wasn't that person. And so it's a little bit.
Did you have a technical co-founder?
Say it again.
Did you have a technical co-founder?
I did not. I had a data specialist, and I had an engineer, and I had them. It was created, but they were not a co-founder. So.
Okay. It's so tricky. I used to run a startup, and I started mine without a technical co-founder, and eventually got into an accelerator who forced me, we will not take you without a technical co-founder.
Like you have to, right.
Yeah. But that relationship is a relationship in its own, and ours wasn't a fit. So like eventually it was just like, we're not working well together. Right. I don't want to find another one. And I also tried to sell and like made it through parts of the legal process, but it is a huge pain in the ass.
It just felt so overwhelming to me that I was like, I don't even know who to email next. I don't even know who my next point of contact is. Like,
nope.
It felt like a mountain that truthfully, sadly, it was one that I was like unwilling to climb at the time. I was like, I've got more exciting things that I want to do.
Yep.
And that, again, is a little bit heartbreaking and kind of makes me feel bad, because I truly believe in the idea, but I just wasn't at a place where I could do it.
Yeah. It's also really expensive. I spent thousands of dollars on legal fees to get to the point where then it fell apart.
Right.
And it's like, I knew that was a risk, but then you're investing money and you're just like, oh,
and
my
it
gosh,
becomes, frustrating and depressing, and you're like, what are we doing here? Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
So.
Okay, but now let's move to your next one. Is this Motel your first experience in property renovation and or like Airbnb hosting guests?
No. So I own a condo in LA.
Okay.
And my first experience with really landlording or hosting anybody was having my room or my 2-bedroom condo be rented out, always to people I knew. So that was like low stakes, low risk. But then in 2021, I quit my teaching job and decided I got to get out of LA. I was ready. I had wanted to get out of LA for the last like 10 years. I was telling people, I was like, I'm going to move to Nashville. I'm going to move to Boston. I'm going to move literally anywhere. And I convinced my parents to split a house with me in Phoenix. I originally wanted to buy in Palm Springs because I thought that would be the perfect kind of Airbnb opportunity. Everybody wanted to go out to the desert. And during COVID, in researching, which is the number one thing I would always do with an Airbnb, is research the local ordinances. Like, make sure you know what you can and cannot do, or if you even can and cannot do a short-term rental. So the restrictions in Palm Springs and the whole desert area were so intense. It was to the point where they were like putting like noise decibel things in people's backyards because noise couldn't be too loud. I was like, that just sounds miserable for any guest. Yeah. I don't want to. The Coachella stuff really ruined it for a lot of people, unfortunately. So I was like, well, let's kind of continue down in the desert and go to a place where we can get a pool and have kind of like a getaway. So we settled on Phoenix. It was still relatively affordable. Unfortunately, I wasn't thrilled because I wanted to not be in a big city, but we bought there, and coincidentally, we closed on it today because we sold it. So we just finished the
congratulations.
Sale. Thank you. Finished the sale of that actually today, this morning. And that I moved there in September of 21. And by January of 22, it was on Airbnb. So I lived there for whatever that is, 5 months, furnished it, renovated, and basically thrifted my way into the cutest little boho Southwestern home ever. And I loved it. It was so much fun. And that was when I really started to do the Instagram. So this Just Do It Amanda Instagram used to be called Cactus House PHX.
I was just going to ask if this was the Cactus House, because that was the only link on your profile that wouldn't work anymore.
Oh,
and now that you said you closed.
That, a few days ago. Yeah, because I took it off Airbnb. So Cactus House PHX was the name of my Instagram. And I was like, let me just show people what I'm doing at the house. Like, let's just, and that was way more low key. It was like stories of here's what I'm doing all day, but reels only if I did a reel before and after, if I was refinishing a piece of furniture, or I would be on stories and show people what I bought at the Goodwill and how I was going to decorate with it. And, all kinds of, I was like a master on Facebook Marketplace. I am like the queen of Marketplace. And so, that was my first like real head first dive in. So it's funny because my mom was all like nostalgic. She's like, I'm sad we sold the house. It was your first real like project by yourself. And in my mind, because I'm such like a forward thinker, I'm like, oh, there's going to be so many more. Like, who cares? Who knows what's next? And so I was the one who kind of pushed to sell it, just so I could have a little extra cash to play with out here.
Yes.
And that really kind of leads into a whole other story, is that like, I really, really, really like where I am, to where the cash being available to me, I wanted to be able to try to create more of a life out here. And I did not know that that's what I would want. Obviously, coming to a completely foreign place to me, but I feel like I should be the poster child for like, take the risk. What if it works out better than you thought?
I like that so much.
People are always, granted, a lot of people are like a little bit pessimistic and worrisome and kind of think worst case scenario, which we can certainly account for. And I don't want to act like that could never happen. But then there's people who are like, oh, well, I think of best case scenario. I'm like, I don't think of any scenario because it could be better than what you dreamed up. Like,
you have to be an Enneagram 7.
Right. I don't even know. what I am.
You have to be.
I might.
Okay. It explains why I like you so much. But yes, because that idea of like this, there's a silver lining everywhere. But what you're saying is like even more than a silver lining of like, what if things go wrong? This is like, my brain can't even imagine that.
It's not, right. And it's like, my brain can't even imagine how well it could be. Like, it's so far beyond my capacity to understand.
And here you are living it. Okay. I want to back up just a tiny bit.
Okay.
And ask you, because there's so much there. I want to start with the move to Greybull.
Yep.
Did Wyoming find you, and then you found the motel? So did Wyoming bring you to the motel, or did the motel bring you to Wyoming?
The motel brought me to Wyoming. And this is also kind of a funny story. So some people know it through my Instagram, but my buddy Kyle, he and I bought the motel together. He and I met via Instagram because my sister was like, oh, you and my friend Kyle both do some renovation stuff. You both have a couple rentals. You should follow each other. You guys would be friends. I said, great. We followed each other, kind of messaged back and forth about real estate stuff for, 6 months to a year. One day off the cuff, we were like, oh, we should get a property together, and kind of joked about it. cut to like 6 months later, he's like, hey, I'm starting to think about like getting the itch to have another property. Would you really consider? And I was like, I am done with Phoenix and back home in LA and itching to get out again. I'm ready for whatever you got. Like,
had you met in real life?
Say it again.
Had you met in real life?
No.
Oh my God.
Hold on, this gets better.
Okay.
So he goes, so the plan was, if we get a property together, I would move to it, and part of my equity contribution would be physical labor there, and his would be cash and whatever. So we kind of had this very generalized scope of what was going to happen, and we were talking about like, where would you want to move to? And I was like, I will move to any corner of the U.S. as long as it's a small town. I don't want to be in a big city. I don't care where I go. I could go to a small town in Florida, Washington, upstate New York, whatever. And I was pumped for the adventure. I didn't care. We both have an affinity for like out west, like this whole everything that is out west. And
yeah,
I had this obsession with rodeos for a while. I was like, I just love. I don't know why I feel so connected to the culture here, considering I grew up in a major city. It feels strange, but when I set foot here, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like this is it. And so anyways, he shows me this motel. We were first looking at like duplexes, triplexes, smaller stuff. And he sends me the link to this motel via Instagram because we still didn't even have each other's phone numbers. And he goes, is this nuts? It's a few more units than we were bargaining for, but it's in the budget. And I go, this is totally nuts. And I am in. This is like, you are right up my alley right now. And so we start laughing and he goes, well, if we're really considering it, we can do like a walkthrough with somebody on Zoom or whatever. And if we really like what's going on, we can fly out there and check it out. He is in Missoula with his now wife, who at that point was his fiance. So I go, okay. And I go, I haven't met Kate, but like, can you you're about to meet this random woman. Like, you're going to pick me up from the airport in Billings and I've never met you before. Can I like message Kate on Instagram and make sure she knows like I'm a decent human being? And like, and he's like, yeah, sure. I'm sure she'd appreciate that. And so then I call my sister and I go, Christy, you're never going to believe it. Me and your friend Kyle like are going to go check out this motel in Wyoming and da da da. And I'm all excited about it. And she goes, oh my God, Amanda, I barely know that guy. She goes, we met at an airport in Detroit and chatted for like an hour and that's it. And I was like, okay, hold on. I was like, you used the word friend. And to me,
you misled me.
Yeah. I was like, that was vetting him right then and there. I was like, I thought he was a personal friend of yours,
Friend of my sister is a friend of mine.
Right. And so Kyle and I got a kick out of that. He was like, everyone in both of our lives are going to think we're crazy. And I was like 100%. So I flew there. I like told everybody where I was going. I was like, here's the person I'm supposed to meet. If I end up chopped up somewhere, like, you know who to call. It was just such a weird thing because we both kind of looked at each other and we were like, this is it. Like, this is the kind of place I want to be. It was such a quaint little town. So adorable. It was in the middle of January and I'm not like a winter lover by any means. I grew up in Santa Monica, 10 minutes from the ocean. And I was like, I can do this. Like, this is so cute. Like, I love it. And we took a tour of it the next day with a realtor. And we were like, this is not nearly as bad as we thought it would be. The bathrooms all needed gutting, but it's like new paint, new flooring in the living areas. And like, we're okay. And again, this is coming from me who's renovated one house for 5 months and it was all cosmetic. And I was like, yeah, we got this. Don't even worry. Like, we're good. And everybody in my
Did he know how little experience you had renovating?
Yeah. So when I got back from Phoenix to LA, I spent that next year of us kind of like chatting, basically doing, for lack of a better term, like DIY for hire. Because of my Instagram, friends of mine saw what I was doing and would hire me to put up wallpaper, make an accent wall in their house, make floating shelves or whatever. And so I really started to get better during that year. I made like a mud room for people in their garage. And so I really kind of honed my skills a lot, which was awesome. And was able to make some money, which was even better. And so we ended up closing on the motel in March. So April 1st, 2023 is when I got up here. That was like day one. So just about a year ago, a year and a couple months. And God, I am like, what am I, 7 units in? I'm working on 7 and 8 right now. And once those are done, I'll have 11 to go.
So there's a total of
So
20?
so there's 19. Some of them were actually combined where like 2 and 3, the wall between 2 and 3 was knocked down before I got here. And the wall between 7 and 8 was knocked down. So I was able to make those a little bigger.
Yeah.
Turn one of the bathrooms into like a kitchenette with running water. So some of them are a
Yeah.
little bigger.
Saw that.
Others are like this is like full blown room, bathroom, and like hardly even enough room for a queen size bed. So some are way smaller. I imagine when I get to renovating this one, it will have to be a nightly because it just is. There's a lot of people here living monthly and like almost basically full time. And so you just want to give them as much as you possibly can. A lot of my tenants are like travel workers. So whether it be travel nurses, I've got a couple railroad guys. There's a big reservoir being built out nearby, and there's guys working on that. So they come to town to do this work, and all these travel workers know how to live within the confines of a room.
Yep.
And it's wild and crazy, but they do, and they're very successful at it. So it's worked out very well.
Okay, so it's a mix. This motel is going to be a mix of short-term rental. You have one listed on Airbnb that I found.
Yeah,
Do you have more than one listed?
No. So the first one I finished, we listed immediately on Airbnb, and it was because it was done, I don't even remember, June or July of last year, and it was right kind of in the thick of tourist season. So we were like, let's go short-term and get this up on Airbnb, and it did great over the summer. And then the kind of the interesting piece to the whole thing is that we had no idea what kind of housing shortage there was in Greybull. We knew that finding a rental was hard to come by. We didn't know how horrible it was for people in town, and for people who were traveling for work to find somewhere to stay. And so I had conversations with the fire marshal and was like, hey, like, is long-term even allowed? What is going on around? And knowing that long-term is available, I was like, this is pretty crazy that like people can't even find a rental to stay. There's nothing available. And the nearest town, so there's towns nearby within 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then 45 minutes west is Cody, Wyoming, which is at the eastern entrance of Yellowstone. And so that's much more of a touristy town, and it's much more expensive. And then the other direction is east is the Bighorn Mountains. And there's no real like major town between us and them. Shell is a smaller town out there. But there's just not a lot of options. And so we kind of decided, we were like, well, what if we really start to rent long-term to some of these people? And we were like, well, if we do, we're going to need leases in place. And this motel had a very, very, very bad reputation. It was very much like a drug situation. Like it didn't have a great vibe. And so when I came in, I wanted to make sure that wasn't the case and that people knew there would be a new reputation for this thing, and it was going to be brand new. And so going through even like an application process was something a lot of people weren't used to doing when trying to stay at a motel, so that's been interesting, but we have had unbelievable tenants. So right now we've got, I think, 11 or 12 leases in place.
Wow.
So all the new rooms are rented out. And then some of the old rooms that are still livable and didn't have a ton of water damage, like some of them did, those are rented out too. So,
and then you'll end the lease and work on those rooms and then re-rent them out.
Right now there are there's 4 units that are unrenovated and vacant. So I'll go one at a time to those. However, if anybody leaves an unrenovated room early, I'll probably jump right into theirs so that no one's having to. I don't want to kick anybody out if I can avoid it.
Yeah.
So,
and I would think that those have less work to do because if someone's living in it now, then they have to be closer to
they're functional
ready.
enough, right? And it's much more just cosmetic stuff. The goal would be to try to navigate it as best as possible to not have to kick anybody out.
But that sounds like a logistical challenge that I wouldn't have thought about, is that you have actual tenants in there while you're trying to renovate.
Right. And honestly, I mean, like I've got 4 or 5 travel nurses in here and every single one of them works the graveyard, which means I get here at, 8:00 in the morning, ready to work a full day, and they're getting home from work ready to go to sleep. And so it's like, oh God, so right now I'm working next to a girl, who is just the sweetest, who knows that I am renovating, and everybody knows going into it. I'm just kind of like, hey, just a heads up. But also, like, from 1 month, the goal right now is to finish 1 unit per month. So the thought is, hopefully, if I'm near your unit, it won't last too long. It won't be terrible forever. But also, realistically, because there's so many things that I need to do that don't require like super loud cutting sounds or whatever.
Right.
You know, I could do flooring and painting and a ton of stuff and finishing drywall, you know, without really making a peep. But there's some days where it's like pipes are getting cut and like plumbing is getting all redone. And I'm just like, oh, my heart is breaking for whoever's on the other side of that wall.
Yeah. Okay, I want to go back to some of the business questions because I think a lot of folks will be wondering about that, myself included.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I'm terrified of co-owning a property with someone else. In fact, I had to be really talked into co-owning one with my twin sister, which you would think would be the easiest one.
Right.
And it still, to this day, scares the shit out of me.
You mean going in with a stranger wouldn't be like the perfect fit for you?
I mean, I would see the opportunity, but yes, it's a little terrifying. So I'm wondering, what were those conversations like once you saw it and you're like, okay, we should get something in writing. I don't want to assume the worst of you, but I also want to cover my bases. What did that look like?
So I feel like a lot of that was done before we even saw the property. Like a lot of that back end stuff at least on my end. And I know like, he wasn't going to text me or call me and be like, hey, do you want to get a property with me? Without feeling like he knew my character and knew what I was about. And granted, we all know that relationships and partnerships between very, very solid friends or even family can go south anytime, any day of the week. Right. But you can only do your due diligence as much as you possibly can. So beforehand, I was kind of like, this sounds so ridiculous to say, but via social media, I know how ridiculous I sound. I really felt like I got a good vibe of who this guy was. I really felt like I understood his moral character and what he was all about. And I felt comfortable even entertaining the idea. It was like, okay, I can at least have this conversation. I also knew that no matter what we were going to do, everything was going to be in writing and everything was going to be signed. It was, you know, he is a big proponent of like, there's no handshake deals. Like, even if we're talking about, hey, are you going to get X, Y, and Z done tomorrow for $500? Okay, great. Put that down in a Google Doc and we'll both sign it or whatever it is.
Wow.
So
okay. I really love that about him.
Yeah. And he works a full-time job at this major contracting company, this construction company that does like huge commercial buildings. So he has a lot of that back-end construction, like logistics knowledge that I did not have. I was showing up like, where's the hammer and drill? Here we go. Like, let's do it. And he's like, okay, there's a lot that we need to discuss. And I'm like, okay, tell me what. Like, I'm game for whatever. And he really kind of steered the ship in that sense. So we started an LLC. So neither one of us are like personally, individually on the hook because both of us have properties outside of our LLC. So at that point, I had my LA condo and the Phoenix house. He had his home in Missoula and a triplex in Missoula. So we both wanted to make sure that we were protected. Should anything go wrong with the LLC or should one person kind of screw the other person? The only thing
your personal stuff was separate.
Exactly. So
okay, quick question about that.
Yeah.
Did you finance the motel at all or did you both have cash to buy it?
No, we financed it. So
okay, so then how did you do that? Because I've tried to create an LLC for my rentals and they tell me that because the mortgages are in my name and I personally have credit, I can't transfer the mortgage over to an LLC because the LLC has no credibility. So if you started a new LLC, how did you move them into it?
We didn't move it
or
into
how
it.
Did you bought it with it?
We bought through the LLC. So we didn't have to move it. We bought.
So even though the LLC has no prior established credit, they were fine with that because of your individual credit.
I assume so. Yeah.
Wow.
I assume so. I will say, so we got the building for $250, which, you know,
Wow.
Yeah. So obviously everybody has a different scope and spectrum of like what's expensive versus not. And I understand that different towns are, you know, the supply and demand and everything, but coming from a major city, $250,000 for 19 units was like, whoa.
Insane.
Okay. So at that point we, and both of us had dealt with properties that were, you know, worth more than that at some point. And, so in talking about it, we were, the concept of what we were going to do was Kyle was going to put down the entire down payment And whatever that down payment was, I honestly don't even remember. I think it was like 60 something. So I would contribute 4 months of my time, and I would get to decide what those 4 months are worth, like monetarily. And then that plus whatever I need to do, pay into it for a renovation budget would get me to 60. Say 60 for even number. So my time plus labor, or my materials plus labor, would match his cash, so we could stay 50-50. And we had a little bit of trouble finding a bank that, truthfully, we didn't have trouble finding a bank that would finance us. We had trouble finding a bank that would finance us the way we needed it. So one, because it was a commercial property, one bank wanted like 40% down, and we were like, we don't have that much cash. Like, we don't, And so we were able to get to, and that's the other good thing about small banks, is that you're kind of able to have that conversation. These big massive banks are like, we have a protocol, and like, if you don't fit it, you're out. Like, we don't care. We don't need your business that badly. Yeah. Especially on a $250,000 building. Like, we don't care. Yeah. So these smaller banks, A, because they have the freedom to do it, and B, because they have a vested interest in the community. Like, they are excited to see this building be rejuvenated. So we were able to find a bank that allowed us, I don't even remember what that was, 20% down, 25, something like that. And so we did that. We had our traditional mortgage, and we went all the way through pretty much to the end of 2023, just figuring out, like, okay, how do we make sure, like, Amanda gets paid enough now that her labor contribution is done? How do we make sure she's getting paid for working full time on this motel, but also we're not like falling down deeper into the red, right? Right. So then we contacted a local bank. The bank we first had was in a town that's about 30 minutes away. And then we talked to a bank locally that's literally 2 blocks from me at the motel, and they were super excited about the idea, and they have their hands on most of the people in the community in terms of dealing with their money. And I was like, truthfully, I didn't even know this bank was here in town. We would have reached out to you for the original mortgage had we known, we had no idea. So they gave us a construction loan. So that closed in March, I believe. And so through the construction loan, I've been able to pay myself and also like get all the subcontractors paid, being electricians or plumbers. And then with that, it's for a year. So that's where our time frame of like trying to get one unit done per month came from. And honestly, it like that was the only way any of this was able to keep going, because what I said to Kyle was we were kind of in a position where we had enough units renting out, so we were breaking even, or not in the red anymore in terms of a monthly profit by like, I'm gonna say September maybe of last year, September, October. And so we were doing, and everything was going great. And so by the time, but we didn't have enough money to like pay me monthly. Right. So we were kind of like, okay, well, either we pause and just collect rent, and like I basically just stay here and act as the property manager, but don't physically work on anything. And the only other way it would work is if I'm continuing to work full time and not getting paid, I would just be eating into his equity. And I know neither one of us wanted to do that. We wanted to stay 50-50. So luckily this bank came through, and it has been an awesome partnership. Super easy to work with. Like, couldn't have asked for a better situation. Yeah.
Okay. So then long term, I'm sure you've thought about this. What do the revenue streams look like? How much of it, like when you did the projections, I would assume motel, you were projecting short-term rentals and doing the math that way. The advantage of long-term is that obviously they stayed occupied for like ideally 365, but the rent or the revenue can go way down. Yes. So how has your business model basically changed since realizing the housing situation?
Yeah, it has definitely shifted, but I will say we accounted for probably like only like 60 to 70% occupancy with an Airbnb with short term. And truthfully, even that could have been pushing it, because there's a tourist season here where people are coming through Yellowstone, to Yellowstone, over to the Bighorns, hunting. There's stuff going on, but there's not stuff going on year round. So it's definitely one of those things where you probably could make more long term, which is probably an anomaly here. just because of how many. The other thing is there's people coming into town for work where they're staying for 3 to 6 months at a time and not necessarily needing to sign a year lease. So you're still having the turnover of people. You're still cleaning rooms. You're still, you're still furnishing the unit. That's the other thing is like, you might sign a year lease with us or a 6-month lease or whatever, but you're still expecting a bed in there. You're not bringing your own bed. You're not bringing your own. So it's kind of this weird middle ground that we didn't know we were going to be in, and we didn't know exactly how to navigate. But truthfully, it has been so much more stress-free without the Airbnbs. Yes,
that's what I was thinking.
It oh my God. Like, and I will say, if I get to the point where, so it's stress-free for me because I'm physically working every day. If I'm doing the renovations, the last thing I want is to worry about, oh shoot, I got to go back into unit 1 and clean it because someone's coming at 3:00. Right. Now, if I finish the motel in a year or however long it takes to finish, well, now I don't have a full-time job here anymore. Now maybe I would like to run it as an Airbnb. Like, now maybe I have the mental capacity and the time and the energy to devote towards like hiring some more cleaners and being able to logistically run the back end. But right now, because I'm physically hammering away, I'm like, that's the last thing I want to worry about. Right. So having tenants that are paying on the first of the month and like are lovely, no news is good news, you're only getting called if it's an emergency, like that kind of thing is priceless when you've got, a mind on the renovation. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. But then there's a world in which, like, if they're more long-term rentals when you're done, you're collecting the revenue from that with very little, like, actual management of the hosting or the whatever, that you could either attack another property or consult people on Airbnbs or renovations. Right. Or, like, there's so many possibilities of what you could do.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's really where my head has gone in. A lot of people are like, oh, are you just going to flip it and then sell it? And I'm like, no, it's like, it's going to be a moneymaker. Like it's doing well. It's doing very well. And I think it can continue to do well. And I think whether you do short-term or long-term is only just a matter of how much time you're willing to put into the day-to-day. So if you're not putting into the day-to-day, it's definitely still making money. It's not, so you're still able to be successful in that way. It's about how plugged into it you want to be on a daily basis. And like I said, selling the cactus house, I was like, that gives me some cash to be able to even consider, like, there's homes here that are ready to be flipped that are, that some are not even livable, but like for $100,000, you can kind of figure out it just is a very unique place. Because it's like on the outskirts of these other towns that like Cody or that has kind of been, I don't want to say like discovered, but it's very much like in this touristy spot. It's such a beautiful little town. And, the other thing is like, not only is it hard for people to find rentals, there's people living in the motel because they've been looking for a house for 6 months to buy. So the housing market versus the rental market, both are almost like nil. Like it is impossible. So people are having a really, really hard time. And anyone that they find to buy is some sort of fixer. And, it's not, no one's getting a move-in ready home. You know what I mean? So it's a very...
Which for you is perfect. For other people, I can see how that's a problem. But also, you could either buy them, renovate them, sell them, or even, I mean, it totally depends. I mean, that seems like your entrepreneurial spirit. That feels like the right way to go. Right. But even just like you now have all the skills that someone could hire you to do that for their own house. But I feel... and it's different though when it's yours versus someone else's.
And I remember saying to my parents when I left to come to the motel and was done doing like the DIY for hire type stuff, the DIY for hire to me was really, really cool because it was this niche of like, you're more than a handyman would do because it's more creative and it's more unique, but you're significantly less than what somebody would need to hire a contractor for. So it's like this perfect niche. And in LA, people will pay for that niche. People will pay. And it's people would definitely pay for it here, but it's just a very different atmosphere. It's a totally different thing. And so I told them when I left LA, I was like, I think I only want to work on properties from now on that I own. And I think it just, the stakes are lower. The liability is lower. It's like, I was working at friends' houses, so I never felt worried, but like, God forbid I got hurt at somebody's house or I screwed their house up or, there's just a lot that can go wrong that a free spirit like me isn't always thinking of all the time.
Yes. Yes. This is literally what my husband does, but we've always called it like he's a handyman, but he's not, because he started doing handyman stuff where it was like, oh, I'll do half-day jobs. But he found that what he really likes doing are bigger projects. So all of our friends are now hiring him to like build projects, which is basically DIY for hire. I really like the way that you've explained that, because handyman is not the right word for what he does, but he's not a contractor. He's in between.
And there's like a certain level of creativity that is required, and like woodworking and like skills that are required to do it, that it's like there's just not really an exact word for it, because like one day I'm laying flooring for somebody and another day I'm like hanging wallpaper, and there's not a lot of people that would do those two things, you know.
That's right. But it's hard to market when you don't have a category or name for it, and that's what he struggles with. Like, he does it for all of our friends, but if he wanted to move outside of our friends, it's like, I don't even know how you market that, because it is kind of
Right.
It's very niche.
It is.
Yeah. So is the motel outperforming your expectations already? It sounds like you're not even done and already, but I don't know what your original projections look like.
I would say it is. I would say it is outperforming where we are right now, because we weren't sure we were going to be able to rent out any unrenovated units. We knew that the building was not properly winterized before we got here. It was on the market for like over a year, and it wasn't winterized while it was on the market. So we knew the pipes were in bad shape. We had tons of leaks at the beginning. It was really, really bad. So we thought, okay, we're going to have no revenue until a unit is done. And like, even then it's going to be a few $100 for the month. And like, we're going to be in trouble for a while. And we realized there were some units that, although not pretty and although not the most glamorous, were certainly livable and had hot water and had heat, and people needed a place. And so we were able to kind of meet that demand, which was really, really cool. And it was an eye-opening experience for Kyle and I, because we had this whole plan of like, nope, we don't want to show anybody anything until it is brand new and amazing. And it's like, well, hold on. People need housing. We have housing. Shut up. Let them, you know, like kind of get your head out of your butt a little bit and like provide the service that you have. And also keep working, and the ones that are nice, people will move into those too. And so it's definitely been outperforming in that sense. I also think it will outperform the projections we had, because we kind of undersold ourselves on what we thought we could rent them for monthly. And that has shifted in the last,
because of the demand, like knowing that the supply is so low.
Because of the demand, and also because like because of the demographic of people coming, whether it be like people not coming from town, so the nightly rate could be higher as a tourist. It just is a very interesting, we didn't expect it to be what it was. I think. Yeah. And there's certain motels in town that won't rent monthly. They just choose not to. They'll rent weekly. And if you want to, and so it could be, you know, $400,
expensive.
Yeah, $400, $500 for a week, but now you're paying $2,000 for a month if you want to stay. And so it's, and because the housing shortage is so severe, some people have come to me saying, do you have any rooms available? Because I'm paying $2,000 over there. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, it's interesting. So
we could beat that and still be outperforming what we had planned on.
And still be well beyond what we had in mind. Yeah.
And the folks that are traveling for work, we've hosted a couple in rural Maine, one of our places is. And we, again, in the off season, that's usually who we host, people coming into town for work. But their work is paying for it, so they don't care. And their work is usually paying, if there's no other option, they're paying per night for a hotel. So like, whoever's renting it is like, does this beat the price of what I'd be paying at a hotel? Cool, then I'm fine with it.
By any stretch, like by any margin, it wouldn't even matter. And we actually were lucky enough to get our first corporate lease signed with one of the companies that is managing part of the project out at this reservoir that's being built. And it's, I don't know how many guys that company specifically has coming into town, but they signed a corporate lease with us. And we're able to work into it like 2 cleans a month for the guy who's living there. And it also protects us in a huge way, because if this guy leaves or gets fired or whatever, this company is still on the hook. They'll throw somebody else in there. And it was pretty cool to experience that for the first time. And know that like, and also you don't want to feel like it's different dealing with an individual. You know what I mean? When you're dealing with a company, like you said, it feels like you're one step removed from the intimacy of the whole interaction, you know?
Yes, yes. Okay, I have so many more questions. I'm going to try and narrow down in the next 8 minutes, but I want to ask quickly about interior design because you're not just renovating this place like structurally and adding heat and like all of that stuff.
Right.
It's also freaking adorable. Like I
Thank
follow
you.
you and I'm like, I want to go to Greybull. Like I want to like see this town.
Right.
And they're really, and so I'm wondering, do you do all the interior design work? Did you have a plan for the whole thing to begin with, or are you just going room by room being like, here's what I'm in the mood for with this unit? Like, how are you approaching this?
Not only am I going room by room, I'm going like night by night. Like I am laying in bed on Amazon or on like different websites. Like, this is cute. I'm going to do this instead. Or I'm going to like, I am to the fullest extent of the word winging it. Like I love it. I truthfully can't even decide which part of the process I like the most, whether it be the demo, putting back together, actual building, drywall, interior design, like all that stuff. Every part of it I love. I
saw a comment on your post today that said, I can't believe how much you love finishing drywall.
Yes. And it's like, it's the weirdest thing. I love the things that people hate. Finishing drywall is like so therapeutic for me. It's like, this is just such a nice, and like, to me, it's like you can't screw it up. You can put on more coats of the mud and sand it down. Like you'll be
just
fine.
Cover it up.
I'm certainly no professional, but we're gonna make it smooth. Like we're gonna make sure this gets smooth. But when I finished the first room, I was really pleased with how it turned out, and that's the one that got up on Airbnb. And I went to the second room, and I remember having a conversation with Kyle that was like, he goes, okay, so like we'll just kind of like churn out those 2 or 3 rooms over and over again. And I was like, I think this might be the one spot where you and I are not like fully aligned, because normally we are like on the same page. And he goes, well, it's just like cheaper and more efficient that way. Like it would go faster. And I'm like, well, none of the stuff that I'm sourcing is on like, is within the 9 to 5 time frame. I'm like, I'm in bed at night. Like I go, you don't need to worry about that time, because I'm just so much more excited at presenting something unique and awesome and exciting and just bold enough to be cool for someone to stay in and acknowledge that they may not do their own house that way because maybe it's a little bit outside of their comfort zone, but like just cool enough to be like, yeah, I want to be in here. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
and give them some ideas. Even if they wouldn't do it just like that, to be like, this looks cooler than something I would have otherwise done.
Right. And maybe I wouldn't pick that color, but I would love to paint a ceiling like you did. Or maybe I wouldn't pick, wood in that area, but I would love to do an accent or a board and batten or a, whatever.
Yes.
And using materials that I have here at the motel. Like every baseboard was an old piece of wood, and I have made accent walls out of all of it. Like it's like all of that is being sourced and being reused because we don't have a money tree out back as much as we would like one,
Yeah.
So,
well, and it's not even just for people traveling and staying there. It's also for all of us who are following you.
Right.
Of like, you're doing it on such a fast pace compared to a lot of us will take a full year to do a house, right?
Right.
And folks who follow us watch that agonizing process of what am I doing? But you're doing 1 room a month. So it's like, we get to see you try all these things and then be like, oh, I really like that. And take that. How much has social media and the growth of your account shaped like your decision to how you approach this? Because if you did all the rooms the same, then after that first one, I will admit the follow would have gotten a little more boring, right? Like,
people would kind of be over it. Yeah, I think I probably, truthfully, I would have wanted the excitement of every room being different, even if it was just me personally showing up every day. But I think I love the growth of the social media has been really cool because truthfully, it's very encouraging. Like we talked about earlier, it's encouraging to show up every day. It's like one of those things where if you weren't really feeling it at 8 a.m., well, by 9 or 10 o'clock, you're like, yeah, I'm in a groove. Like I'm in a groove.
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot more done than I thought I was. People are going to love this video tonight. It's going to be great. Or oh, I'm excited because they haven't gotten to see the wallpaper, and here today is the wallpaper day,
Yeah.
So things like that definitely make it easier. I mean, I love hearing suggestions from people. I think the one thing that kind of breaks my heart is that I am kind of unwilling to go too far in any one, actually, I don't want to say in either. I'm unwilling to go too far only feminine. Like, I'm too afraid. Like, I've had a lot of people be like, oh, do a bright pink, like, cowgirl room, or do this, and have it themed, kind of. And I want to keep it, it can be moody, it can be dark, it can be light, it can be bright. I just kind of hesitate to go too girly or too manly, kind of, for lack of a better term. But I feel like it's one of those things where I want everybody to be able to step in there and be like, huh, this is cool. Like,
Yeah.
It's not like, oh God, why are the sheets frou-frou and ruffly, you know? So it's just enough of having it be neutral to where anybody, whether it's be a couple or a single person or a family, could come in there and be like, cool, I like this.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Have you had your first guest yet who found you on social media and came to Greybull because of you and what you're doing?
So yes, I've had guests stay at room 1, which is the Airbnb, who found me on social media. But more importantly, when I first got to Greybull, I was probably having 10 or so people pull into the motel per day. And the reason for that is A, because of the social media, but B, because before I got here, there was an article written in the Cowboy State Daily, which is the Wyoming newspaper, that posts all over Facebook and everything about LA woman coming to Greybull to renovate this motel. Now you can imagine my horror knowing that, like, I'm not always super proud of the LA woman title. You know, it's like coming to a place like this. I was very, very worried. And I just wanted to be able to at least shake people's hands first before they had a judgment. Like, I just want to, don't worry, I'm not trying to bring some liberal agenda. I'm like, let me say hello. Like, I promise I'm down to earth. Like, I moved here for a reason. And, everybody would reference this sign going into Cody, which again, I told you is a very touristy town. And the billboard said, "Don't California our Cody." And so that was up for a long time. And so a lot of people would reference that. And the only response I ever had was, "I am trying to Greybull my California. Can you just allow me to do that?" I have been trying to Greybull my California. And I'm not in anybody's business. Like, I'm trying to Greybull my California. So most people
I love that.
Love hearing that. And I'm like, I don't need to keep tabs on what anybody's doing. I don't care. So it has been the overwhelming amount of support from people locally was far more important for me than the support on social media, because these are the people that I have to interact with every single day.
And you're living there.
And it is, oh my God. I mean, I walk in and people are like, I walked into a pizza spot across the street and like when I first got here, and they were like, "I recognize you. You're from across the street." And I'm like, should I be embarrassed? And they're like, "No, you're doing great, girl." Like, you know, so it has been like, and honestly, a year later, people are like loving it. It's just like been so nice. I've like made a group, like made friends. I've like been so welcome into this community that I'm like, I couldn't have asked for, like we talked about earlier, I could not have asked for a better situation, even better than I could have expected.
I love hearing this because honestly, I have thought about this 5-10 times when following you at different moments of just like, I wonder what life is like there for her. I wonder like if she has friends. I literally have asked myself these questions. And so to hear that is beautiful. Right.
And I try like sometimes commenting back on my Instagram, like I'll post it at night and want to just put my phone down. So once I get the video up, some nights I'm a little bit better if not much is going on and I'll like respond to comments. But other nights I'll just be like, I'll look at them in the morning. I just want to like put my phone away. And and even truthfully, since starting to see somebody, the last thing I want to do is be staring at my phone all night after work. Right. So I'll drop it and whatever. And so I have been definitely less engaged in the social media in terms of the interactions since that's happened. But truthfully, like it like, and so I also comment less about like what I'm doing outside of work. Like I'll talk about like the fun stuff going on in town or outside of town, but I'm less like, I'm not very much wanting like, oh, let's have people keep tabs on me and show them exactly what I'm doing on Friday and then Saturday.
You do a good balance. Yeah. Yeah. Your personal life is not super present in it, which is why in my brain, but at the same time, your followers become personally attached to you because we're literally like part of a day-to-day journey. Yeah. And so that's where my brain wonders, like, I hope she's happy. I hope this is like a good town for her.
And it's funny because when I first introduced the dog into my videos, it's so funny because my boyfriend got that dog. And we kind of agreed that I'd like bring him to the motel every day, and I love it, and it's great. But I also,
and the people love it.
But I also wasn't positive that it was like either appropriate or the right time or what I wanted to do to be like, hey, I got this dog because this person I'm seeing. Now everybody has more questions about that. Well, did you meet him here? And now it's like this, and I didn't. And so I asked him. I had the dog at the motel with me for probably like a month before I put him on the camera. And so one day...
Because you knew the questions would come.
And well, I went to him and I said, is it okay if the dog is shown. And he was kind of like, yeah, why? And I was like, well, it kind of has an implication, because if someone's like, oh, whose dog is that? I'm now answering, you know what I mean? It's like, it means more than just, hey, there's a dog by my foot in the video.
Right.
And so I knew, and like you said, people are invested in what I got going on. Like, did you get yourself a dog because you're lonely and there's nobody? And it's like, no, I'm with somebody and that's great. But so it kind of is, it was an interesting conversation, and one that I've certainly never had to have before. It's like, definitely uncharted territory for me. But just wanting to respect the other person's privacy too. It's like, not just because I'm doing this does not mean anybody else signed up to have any of their live on video, Right.
I can't imagine. I started the Cozy Rock Instagram. Sean and I were already together. I cannot imagine if we had met like into the journey.
Right.
Because I share a lot of personal stuff on there, probably too much. And so it would have been impossible to keep him out of it. And he's just kind of been stuck with it regardless.
Right.
But that introduction would have been really scary, because it also sort of commits you to that person, because it means it's like announcing your status on Facebook.
Right.
I never did that ever, because I was like, well, what if we break up? I don't want it to be broadcast to everyone that we broke up.
Right. Like, well, what happens then? Yeah. And it's like,
you have to answer all the questions then too.
Right. And I mean, it's also like, you think about the personalities of different people. Like, I have had friends or boyfriends or whoever, people I've dated or whatever, where it's like, yeah, he may be a little more active on social media. Maybe he does post to his story, or maybe he does. But like, this person does not. And it's not like, there's no social media activity really going on. So it's like, talk about 0 to 100. And it's like,
So how does he feel about it?
I think he, truthfully, and I'll show him this, I think he thinks it's a little bit ridiculous. Which is fine. And we joke about it. And because there's sometimes where I look at what I'm doing and I'm like, I think it's a little bit ridiculous too.
Same.
Because all of it feels a little silly. But then, like I said, you get the feedback and people are excited to see it. Now, I don't think he thinks what the physical act of what I'm doing is ridiculous. I think that is respectable and cool. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on there. But the whole like documenting everything and toting around this, tripod, it's a little bit silly, And so, we joke a lot. And so I'm happy to have him like make fun of me for that, because that is just as ridiculous as he thinks it is. I would probably agree. So
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Even though my family teases me all the time about how active I am on social media. They're like, well, we don't need to ask you any questions because we know everything going on in your life from your 5 Instagram accounts. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
But also, like, look what it's done for us. Like, look how many guests we found at the cabin. Like, there's so much good that comes from it that it's hard to, like, ignore that, too.
Exactly. And truthfully, like, I have had this kind of, interpersonal conversation going on for a while that's like, I have no problem filming the reel every day, and it's just become kind of part of my work day. But I don't know how much longer I would want to do it. And not that I would want to just like stop cold turkey and say, forget it. But that I really am cherishing my personal time, and that I really like my life outside of the motel. And when I first got here, my life outside of the motel was being at the motel. And was grabbing a freezer meal and eating it at the motel, and sitting outside and watching the sunset at the motel. It was just like, that was life. And now that I've met more people and that I could see myself, just being more engaged in what I'm doing all day.
Which is great.
And obviously it's a good problem to have. It's like, it's amazing. So I don't know. Now, having said all that, a lot of it will depend on like, what I'm able to kind of capitalize on in terms of like brand partnerships, or if I'm able to hustle up a little bit more product and things for the motel, like those are certainly opportunities that I don't want to turn away either. So just because I know there's at least another year's worth of content that kind of needs to, and work that needs to be done. So I know there's potential there. So it's like, would throwing in the towel now be worth, having to come out of pocket for all that stuff, or, kind of trying to balance that. So, but I probably started having that personal conversation in the last like month or two, where I'm like, I wonder like how that would look if I didn't do it every single day. What if I did every couple days, or, I don't know. But I will say, go ahead. I was just going to say, I'm a pretty like low key laxed person, to the point where like, if I miss a day, that is certainly not the end of the world. Like I've been pretty good about staying on it, but like, I'm also not really beholden to telling people why I didn't show up on Wednesday. And like, I just show up on Thursday and it's the next consecutive day. I'm like, hey, it's day 25 now. Like here, I don't really feel the need to like say, here's what happened, like here's why.
And nobody, I would think, notices, or even if they do, they're not like, how dare she? They're just like, oh, I hope she's okay.
Right. And truthfully, those are the DMs I get. If I go 3 or 4 days and haven't posted anything, people are like, hey, I hope you're good. I'm like, I'm shocked you even knew. But thank you. But yes, I'm fine. Yeah. So it's like, I just want to make sure it stays low stakes. I want to make sure it stays, because if it gets to be beyond that, it's not even fun.
It feels so different. And I will say it changes so much. Like I documented so much during our build, although what you described originally for your first house is how I did Cozy Rock, and I documented all of it on my stories, which in retrospect was a bit of a mistake because you don't find new people via stories. You just build relationships. Yeah. But then once the cabin was finished, it changes a lot about what kind of content you have to put out there. So I feel like in your case, once it's done, your content would have to be rethought anyway. Like, okay, how am I documenting this phase, which is so different from the phase before it?
And that's actually exactly why I changed my handle from Cactus House PHX to something broad, like Just Do It, Amanda, because we might be documenting in 2 years a laundromat that I'm renovating. Like so I just didn't want to be beholden to one property.
It's and so I was smart.
Like, this needs to stay broad. And that was obviously through trial and error, because I got to the end of the Cactus House and I was like, do I just like show guest reviews? Like, what do I
Yes, same.
Yeah. I'm like, what do I show?
It's hard.
And that was tricky. And I think you, better than I, have created more of like an environment and a community around the cabin lifestyle, which I think is so cool, because I was kind of like, okay, it's just a Southwestern house. I love it and it's adorable, but like it's not, we all know that like a house is not a cabin. You know what I mean? Like there's something magical about a cabin that, just kind of makes it draws something from you emotionally, not in a way that like a house with a pool is going to do. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that is really cool. But I felt like by the time I finished with the Cactus House, I was like, I feel like I'm limited. I feel like I got to change this name, and it's got to be about me doing it and not the house. And so I kind of said, if I can make it about me, then not only can I bring it with me to every project, I also can like not do it if I don't want to. It becomes, it puts me back in the driver's seat.
Just Do It, Amanda doesn't do it.
Right. Just Do It, Amanda.
If she doesn't want to.
She's not doing anything.
But I love the way that you're documenting it under the name Just Do It, Amanda. You, at least what attracted me to it, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I'm going to make some assumptions here, that a lot of the people who are following love DIY, love renovation, love watching someone a bit more ambitious with a bit more energy than us do the things that we wish we could.
Right.
And that is transferable. Your following will follow you to whatever you do next, whether it's a laundromat or a house or a condo or whatever.
Right.
Like, you're not losing people because you're no longer a Cactus House in Phoenix. It's like whatever you're doing next, like, we're here for it. Like, cool, another project that I can't do, like, I'm going to watch Amanda do it.
Right. And I think what's cool is that the motel provided the perfect storm of being able to kind of go viral enough to get the audience to then show what I'm doing. Because had I just said, okay, Cactus House followers, I'm going to go to this house now in Greybull, it wouldn't have had the same allure. So as much as it is about me, I had to have that one hook that like, it's like, oh, girl from a big city goes to small town to renovate a motel by herself. That story is cooler than this girl's just bouncing around, making accent walls.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's
I love this so much.
Storm.
Yes. I am pitching Airbnb right now. If anybody listening knows anybody at Airbnb, I desperately want to lead a documentary film campaign for them telling the stories of hosts and travelers.
Oh, cool.
But I feel like your story would be such a good one. Like, there's so many cool people who are doing cool things, and you probably, I'm guessing, actually maybe you can tell me, would you and Kyle have done this if Airbnb wasn't a thing and you couldn't have projected what would a motel like this make?
Yeah, no, you're probably right. I don't think we would have. I think it's one of those things where the idea of long-term tenants to Kyle was a little bit more alluring, and he had done the long-term thing. And that was I was really only familiar with Airbnb, and I was really so much more comfortable. I was comfortable with the platform. I was comfortable with like, getting, talking to guests and managing guests and things like that.
Yep.
To where that's kind of what I expected most of this adventure to be. So the fact that it has shifted, I also think just speaks to the fact that like Kyle and I have such a great partnership and are willing to be flexible, and it's going so smoothly that like, we're kind of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like we're going to day by day, we have like a list of like the current leases we have in place and what our plans are. And he's like, this document is as fluid as it gets. Like this could change tomorrow and it will be different than it was yesterday. So it like, we know that, and that's okay. And to your point earlier about getting into partnerships, it's like, you don't know that that's going to be the case for getting into a partnership with your husband or with your dad or with your brother or with your friend. Like you just don't know.
Right.
And you really don't know how people, I think the one thing that I saw in Kyle was his kind of even keelness. And I'm a pretty even keel person when it comes to stress and when it comes to like hardships and like perceived hard times and how things can get difficult. And I think I could tell in him that he was a pretty even keel guy, and that, I thought to myself, now the other thing is having this condo in LA is a huge sense of financial stability for me. So that allows me to take a risk knowing that if in some crazy world I need to sell my LA condo, which I hope to never have to do, if I had to, I would be fine. I also know that if I didn't have this LA condo and I fell right back on my butt, I could go right back into my parents' house and they'd be like, great work, Amanda, you tried. You know what I mean? Like, and not everybody has that. So I'm well aware of those privileges that I have and how awesome my support system has been. To know that no issue felt that big of a deal. So as Kyle and I talk about financial things and like, the electric bill being, $3,000 because everybody's using a space heater because our heating units are not pumping out when it's -30, we're kind of like, all right, well, we'll figure it out. Like, that's okay.
And neither of you are getting worked up because that can often turn into pointing fingers.
No one is getting worked up. No one is getting worked up. The other thing,
I think, is one of the keys.
Yes. The other thing is his level of like selflessness in all this and just kind of awareness. And what's the word? Kind of almost like taking responsibility for me and my life has been so, so, so awesome. He says once or twice a month, if you don't like it there, you don't have to stay. You do not feel like you are stuck. Do not feel like you have to post on Instagram. Do not feel like I am, waiting on you to get shit done. If you are not happy, he goes, I know you're in a relationship right now. If you want to leave. If we need to hire someone to finish the rest of this, we will. If you want to throw in the towel and never be at that motel again, say the word. And I think that made me feel like, oh, how bad could it be? My initial investment in terms of time was 4 months. And he said, you do 4 months of work and the renovation budget.
And we're even.
And he goes, and we're even. We'll sell the building half done, a quarter done. Who cares? Like, and so neither of us felt like it was the end of the world. Nothing that happens would be so catastrophic that like, and so every couple weeks he's like, you still feeling good? You still like it? And I'm like, yep, we're good. He's like, just making sure. Like, and I'm like, there's not a lot of people that would care at all, let alone that much. He's like, the only way I'm good is if you're good. So he's like, this is running on you. So like, if you're giving me a thumbs up, I'm feeling good about it. You know what I mean?
Isn't it kind of funny that you hate dating apps, yet you created a dating app and you met your dream business partner on an app?
That is kind of wild. That is pretty wild. That is very crazy. Yeah.
I love where it's taken you, and I love following the adventure. And you are one of the busiest people I know, so I do not want to take any extra amounts of your time because I'm literally thinking, like, what am I keeping her from? What does she need to finish working on today?
I'm also the person that could talk about this until I'm blue in the face. And when I meet someone that I vibe with, I could talk about this with you until tomorrow morning. Like it's just,
I know. Well, when I come to Greybull, we will.
Yes, yes, yes.
I'm already being convinced by other folks that I need to come to the area, but now it's like multiple things. Yep. Like we have to do it.
There
so
it's
just a matter of when.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you so much for doing this. Literally, it's been such a treat to meet you. I've followed your adventures and to hear more of it, and I can't wait to see what you guys do at that place and what comes next.
Yes, major things coming next. I don't know what it is yet, but I can guarantee it'll be a good time.
Stay tuned. Thanks so much for joining us, and if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.